If you were to ask a member of the Muslim Brotherhood in any kind of country to sum up the goal of their organization in one word, it might be Islam, but it would be just as likely to be the word reform, meaning that they want to make a better society, they want to make better Muslims, they want to make better individuals, and so on. And that's been their goal since the movement was founded back in the late 1920s in Egypt and then spread outside of that. Now, we associate the Arab world with authoritarian governments until very recently. And that certainly was the case. And those governments simply shut down politics. But what's happened in a lot of societies, or what happened in a lot of societies, beginning in about the 70s or 80s, was a partial opening up. And what the Muslim Brotherhood decided to do was to use that partial opening to basically go into politics knowing that they weren't going to win in any election. And that's since the title of the book, When Victory is Not an Option. They knew they weren't going to win, but they still thought that they could get something out of the political process in terms of pushing their reform mission forward, reaching out to new constituents, sketching out a complete program, and really becoming kind of opposition movements in this sort of like netherworld between full authoritarianism and democracy. The Brotherhood went into politics then in the 70s and 80s. It depends on the precise date varies with the country, but they went in knowing that they were going to lose the elections, and knowing that if they even tried to win, that they would scare the government, probably provoke repression, they'd scare other opposition parties, they'd probably scare international actors as well. So they developed this slogan called participation, not domination. And that explains kind of what they were trying to do. They would even run for fewer seats than they had the opportunity to do, then they might even win, so that they would deliberately communicate to everybody that they were going for a minority. Now, when those authoritarian regimes began to come into crisis in 2011, first in Tunisia and then in Egypt, the Brotherhood didn't quite know what to do. On the one hand, this was a tremendous opportunity. It looked like the barriers that were imposed by these regimes were just about to fall. But on the other hand, they had this historic mindset that said, we've got to move slowly, we've got to move gradually. If we move too hard too quickly, then we'll just prompt a harsh reaction from the regime. We may even prompt a harsh reaction from the international system. Look at what happened to Hamas when it forgot the participation, not domination slogan and actually won an election. That could happen to us here. And so they really were caught in the Arab Spring towards the beginning in kind of this to and fro, sometimes trying to say, don't worry, we're not going to try and win, but then at other times saying, this is our historic opportunity. And in both Tunisia and Egypt, where this happened, they became used to the idea that perhaps they could not simply participate in politics, but participate in government. But it was an uneasy transition for them and one they still haven't completed. If you go back to Egypt in the 1990s, that's when the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood decided, if we ever get the opportunity, we will form our own political party, kind of separate from the movement. But this is not the time to do it. That's what they said in the 90s. 2011 came, and suddenly it was the time to form a political party. But they didn't quite know exactly how they wanted to do it. They knew that the goal of the organization was not just to win elections, but to reform the entire society and make Egypt more Islamic, make the individuals within the organization better Muslims and that sort of thing. And so what they did was they formed a political party, but they gave it a very, very short leash. They took 3 of the top leaders from the Muslim Brotherhood movement and put them in charge of the party, just to make sure that the party wouldn't go too far away from the principles of the movement. What they didn't anticipate, I think, was how successful the party would be. They grew to like that political success. But what happened was that the coalition that the Freedom and Justice Party, their political party formed, came close to winning. They didn't win a majority, but they won something close to it, and they can clearly dominate the parliament, and they're also now in the position of being a kingmaker for the expected presidential elections. Who the Freedom and Justice Party supports for the presidency could easily become president. They've set up to now they won't run their own candidate, but they could make somebody else president. But there are some within the movement who have some kind of nagging doubt, saying, wait a second, we're getting so sucked into politics that we're forgetting the other parts of our mission. And when I was in Egypt last month, I talked to people on both sides, both in the Muslim Brotherhood movement, the main movement, and in the political party side. And it was clear to me that the most dynamic people in the organization have shifted over to politics and shifted over to the party. And the movement's broad goals, which have to do with education and charity and reform in the social sphere, and that sort of thing may be lagging a little bit behind. So it's, again, an uneasy transition for the Brotherhood. It's one that they're excited to make, but they still haven't quite figured out how to square politics with the rest of their goals. We talk to people in the party, and they're very well aware of the fact that the international community is looking very, very hard at a very few issues: how they're going to treat women, how they're going to treat Egyptian Christians, and how they're going to treat the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty. And they're trying very, very hard to send reassuring signals, especially on the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty. You talk to people in the movement, and they're willing to kind of mouth those words. Yes, we don't want to disrupt Egypt's existing international obligations, but it's clearly more difficult for them, and they clearly are reluctant to endorse the full acceptance of the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty. They'll do it, but they don't like doing it. The real tough thing for these societies, now that they're entering into a more pluralist and more democratic environment, will be to integrate the Islamist parties as normal political actors. And that will demand a couple things. Number one, it really means that it can succeed if what you have is an Islamist movement that is powerful and unavoidable, but cannot dominate by itself. The kind of electoral outcome, for instance, that you saw in Tunisia, where the Islamist party is the largest one but can't rule without forming a coalition with non-Islamist parties, that's a very, very healthy development. The problem in Egypt is that the Brotherhood did a little bit better than it expected, and the largest party not from the Brotherhood is a group of Salafis who are even more Islamist in a sense in their thinking than the Brotherhood. So that makes it a little bit more difficult. The second thing I think that has to happen is that the movements will really have to decide what they're going to do about the political realm. When you have a movement that is this far-reaching, that, you know, if you enter it, you're entering this entire society that really dominates an awful lot of your life, that's pretty hard for society to incorporate as a normal political actor. One of the Brotherhood leaders, one of their leaders in the parliament right now, was talking to a Brotherhood audience. This was late last year. And he told these young Brotherhood men, you know, if you really want to pursue an Islamic agenda, you should marry within the Brotherhood, okay? I cannot imagine a political leader in a normal democratic system trying to tell, for instance, Democrats you shouldn't marry Republicans or that sort of thing. If you look at the goals of the party, for instance, they're taken straight from the movement. What we're trying to do, they say, is we're trying to make Egypt better, we're trying to make it more just, we're trying to improve not simply Egyptian society, though, we're trying to improve the Egyptian family, and we're trying to reform Egyptian individuals. Again, put that in a normal democratic setting and try to imagine a politician here trying to run for office saying, I'm going to reform you and I'm going to come after your family and reform them too. It doesn't make for normal democratic politics. So those movements and those societies are going to have to figure out kind of what are the rules of the political game and where politics ends and where other kinds of concerns, social concerns, family concerns, moral concerns, religious concerns begin.